back to Devtalkspodcast. I'm sitting here with Dr. Cochran. And Chris, I'll let you take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician. I grew up in the Ozarks, specifically in Fulton County, Arkansas, Mammoth Spring, about 50 miles from here, just across the state line. And I practiced in West Plains for about 20 years, but over the last 6 months, I've decided to migrate my practice back to my hometown. It's a 2.5 mile drive instead of a 25-mile drive. It's been real nice to do that. But I have always been a rural guy and went to school for a long, long time. And so I learned a lot about the birds and the bees specifically, and hunted and fished all my life, and lived on in the Ozarks. And so just growing up cutting wood and flipping over rocks and learning all about the things that I saw in my environment, it just made me more and more interested in things. And so my hobbies get pretty transient. I got the internal medicine thing down pretty good, I think, after 20 years of doing it. And so I, one day, if we want to gently segue into honeybees, which is what you said you mentioned, one day I'm a pretty avid gardener, and it was probably just me being impatient, but if you have the group of plants that we all love and to eat that are in the same family called the cucurbits, which would be watermelons, cucumbers, squash, cantaloupe, that group,
kind of watery.
Well, just that whole that whole group. They're all related. Well, they all have one thing in common. They have a male flower and a female flower, and so they are obligate to have a bee visit one and then visit the other. And so when they don't do that, they make a little stunted plant or stunted fruit that you can't eat. And so I was having a lot of those one year, and I said, what's going on here? And so I, of course, looked up how to attract more bees, and there are lots of things you can do to attract honeybees pretty quickly. Oil of anise, which smells like black licorice, or lemongrass oil, which smells kind of like pledge. Those things both immediately attract honeybees, and actually use those in my beekeeping now for various purposes. But so I got honeybees to start coming to my cucumbers that way. But then I was like, well, why don't I just get my own honeybees? And so moved into that hobby. Found a Mennonite who had recently moved to the area. He's in Bexar, Arkansas, which is down below Viola. And he serendipitously, he's famous for his small cell honeybees that are not treated and not very, if you could call it, organic honeybees. And so hooked up with him, and they have telephones, and
they do.
He does. The group known as Anabaptists are variable from pod to pod. It all depends on what their elders say they can or can't do, and I've learned that by being around Myron. And so I got some packages of bees from Myron, and I've had bees for 10 or 15 years now, just as a hobby. I don't want to set the world on fire with honey, but it's just they're just fascinating. I like messing with the bees. Messing with honey is a real job because you harvest it in June and July when it's about 1,000 degrees, and it's a hot, sticky, messy job.
I was going to say, I bet that's a labor-intensive job. Whenever it comes,
it's pretty hot and sticky. But I maintain about 8 to 12 hives, but I get new hives because once the word gets out. And the other thing is that honeybees were last year's chickens. And so I don't know how people are doing it now, but for a while there, everybody got honeybees and didn't manage their hives great at first, because we never do. Beekeepers measure their expertise in years of doing it, because really, when you meet a beekeeper, they go, how many years have you been doing it? And that's like sort of a rank.
Okay.
If you 2 years versus 14, it's a hierarchy immediately. And so
so it's very much trial by fire.
You learn something every time you open the hive.
Yeah.
And it's more difficult than you would expect it to be for something that is a natural process that's been going on for way before humans were around. So I get called for swarms, and I go get them. I used to be real ambitious, and I would do cutouts and get bees out of people's houses and stuff like that is labor intensive, and I work too hard. I don't have time for that. But there are younger beekeepers that have the energy to do that. So we all kind of network. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How many when you're talking about hives, what's the average number of like bees to hive? Or is there like a...
They're not really measured. 80,000. I don't know.
Holy crap!
You don't really count them.
Yeah. I didn't know if there was like a certain like...
In medicine we would call that TNTC.
TNTC. What's that mean?
Too numerous to count.
Yeah. I can see that. Whenever it comes to... Okay, so when you first started out, you were attracting wild bees?
Well, yeah. Let's get some terminology clear. And because natural purists get really cranky when you start calling non-native things anything other than okay, because the European honeybee is not native to the North American continent. It was brought here by our ancestors.
Yes.
Probably migrated out of Africa into Europe, and so there are two groups of honeybees, major groups of honeybees that are used for honey, the Eastern and Western or European honeybee. And so we have the European honeybee here, Apis mellifera, and they are not native. And so technically they are either naturalized or feral, not wild.
Yes.
And so the wild bees or native bees would be the bumbles and the mason bees and the squash bees. And there's a ton of those.
Yes.
And they come to my squash and my garden as well. As it turns out, the non-native bees tend to like the non-native plants better. So
really,
it just they co-evolved with the flowers of Europe and the old world, and the like say for instance, there's a lot of flowers in the Ozarks that honeybees can't use because their noses aren't long enough.
Really?
Yeah. So but the bumbles can, and then those big moth. If you've seen those moths that look like bumblebees, they've got big long snoots. They can use a lot of the different flowers. And so too.
Basically, that snoot is for getting inside that.
Down inside that, yeah.
To get the sweet nectar.
Yeah, not a native to the United States plant, but we have native honeysuckles. But there's a country music song where he says you can be my honeysuckle and I'll be your honeybee. Oh, it's not accurate because honeybees don't use honeysuckle at all. They can't reach down in there to get the nectar. Hummingbirds and bigger bees can, but yeah,
that makes sense. On average, whenever it's time to I guess get your honey, how much honey are you usually looking at as far as whenever it comes out? Whenever you start collecting the honey, like volume wise?
Oh boy. I didn't collect honey last year because you were here. It was horrible.
Yes.
It was a horrible summer. I left them alone and let them survive as best they could.
That's their food source.
Well, they had nothing to eat except their own honey last summer, and because it didn't rain from it was 100 degrees from June to August, and it didn't rain.
Yeah.
And so there was nothing to eat. I couldn't even keep cover crops and stuff alive because I plant cover crops in the part of my garden that's fallow.
And cover crops, what's that mean?
It's a broadcasted crop that you're not going to eat necessarily, but they do things like enrich the soil. And an example would be mustard or crimson clover or something like that. And those are both very honey producing plants, but I couldn't even keep those alive last summer because the weather was so horrible. So I left them alone. But the summer before, when we harvested, I don't know, we harvested about 8 hives, and I got 20 gallons of honey.
Wow, that's quite a bit. That's a lot of honey.
Yeah, I don't sell honey. It's sort of one of those things. Instead, when I go to somebody's house, instead of a bottle of wine, I'll bring them a jar of honey, and they actually like that probably better.
Oh yeah,
because I don't have particularly good taste in wine. So
I don't think anyone does. I think most people just bullshit and go with it.
Well, yeah, we have, my wife and I we have words. Everybody talks about bouquets and flavors and all this stuff, and I think they're full of crap.
Oh, the nose, it's so earthy.
Yeah, as Michael Scott would say, "Oh, this one has an oaky afterbirth." He actually did say that.
He did say that.
Yeah, we have one word, and it's smooth. Oh, honey, this one's really smooth. Yeah, that's our word for wine.
Now that's like us, me and my wife. Whenever we're looking for something sweet, usually,
I
like sweet wine because
Sure.
In my mind, wine coincides with sweetness.
Okay.
I didn't. I'm not a wine connoisseur. I don't know much about it. But we went to Kansas City and we went and ate at Eddie V's. Have you ever ate there?
I have not.
Amazing restaurant. If you're ever looking up that direction for a good restaurant.
I lived in Kansas City for 3 years.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, but and so we go back sometimes. I still have, I still have family there. And so, yeah, we visit, and we're Chiefs fans. So,
yeah.
So we went to a game a couple summers ago or falls ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we got there and we were wanting to try something new. It was our anniversary or something. And I was like, okay. I said, let's get us a red wine. To me, red, for some reason, my brain automatically went, red is going to taste fruity.
Nope.
No, it was the bitterest. I had to act like I liked it.
It's dry.
Yes, very dry.
Yeah.
And
you kind of go through these phases with wine. When you learn to like dry wines, you think you'll never drink a sweet wine again, but there are so many sweet wines that are delicious paired with, like, say, like a Riesling that's prepared, a really good Riesling that's paired with Thai food or something like that, something spicy. That's really delicious. And Rieslings are sweeter white wines that they're not as sweet as like Moscato, which everyone drinks a lot. But anyway, how do we get on that? But anyway, honeybees. So yeah, they are productive, and it's a lot of honey, and we got 4 or 5 gallon buckets.
And have you ever just out of my curiosity, have you ever tried to make a honey mead?
I'll be honest with you. I've drank a lot of mead. I mean, I've drank a lot of different meads.
Yes.
And every time I drink it, I realize why my Northern European ancestors were so happy when they discovered barley.
Yeah.
Because it's if it's all you had, you drink the hell out of it. But I mean, it kind of tastes like sweet flat beer to me.
Really?
And I mean, if you could make a dry one for me, I might like it. But they're always so wine cooler. It sort of tastes like wine cooler with no bubbles in it to me. But
really,
yeah. But I'm up to the challenge. If someone made a delicious mead, I would give it a go. But to be fair, the meads I've had were made by my friends, and so they've been just kind of rot gut
craft people.
Rot gut version of mead. If someone was a really good guy and made one that was, but you notice historically that when our ancestors discovered barley and then subsequently fermentation, they didn't make mead anymore.
No, they went straight to the beer.
Beer and whiskey. Yeah, that's what they decided. But yeah, so yeah, I have never decided to make it. But because I would feel bad. I have such a issue with making a bad product because in my job you don't get away with that, and
exactly.
That if I made crappy meat, I would force everybody to pretend they liked it, kind of like bad barbecue or something like that. So,
drink this, smile, and tell me it's good.
Right. Isn't this good, honey? My wife would hate it.
Gagging it down. Yeah, it's amazing. And so honey, it's used for lots of different things throughout history. One thing that's it's really captured me is the preservation that it has for meat. Yeah.
Well, it's bacteriostatic, meaning bacteria, nothing can grow in it, because what honey is that it's the most ultimate super concentrated sugar that you could imagine. It's higher than you can just take table sugar and dissolve in water. It won't stay in solution, and part of that is because there are enzymes. The process of making honey is a little bit untoward if you think about it in too literally. So the bees drink the flower nectar. Everybody knows that, but people have this notion that they put it in like nectar storing containers in their body. They don't. They put it in their stomach. Yeah. Then they get back to the hive and they literally regurgitate it next to their friend, who then imbibes it. And then goes to this is a little bit simpler than it is, but goes to a cell in the honeycomb and then regurgitates that regurgitated twice puked nectar and then they stand over it and flap their wings and dehydrate it.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and then, so there are enzymes in the bee's stomach that actually lend to that concentrating process. Because if it's January,
Hmm.
and if they just stuck flower nectar, if they could somehow get the flower nectar in there, it would just be hard crystal,
Yeah.
because the enzymes in the bee's stomach actually allow it to be liquid at a very concentrated form. But by virtue of it being so concentrated, they can't nothing can live in it. It's like, if it's like salt. Okay,
Hmm.
if you have, I mean, it's even worse than salt, actually. It's so, what we call, it's so hygroscopic, meaning that if you put something with a membrane inside of it, where the concentration of sugar is less on the inside than it is the honey, which
Hmm.
everything would be, the all of the liquid inside of that membraned thing, a la bacteria, leaves it. So if a bacterium lands in honey, it is immediately desiccated, completely dries out and kills it.
Wow.
So nothing can live in honey. And the only not example, or exception to that, is that there are some some anaerobic spores that can live in honey, not live, but not be killed in honey. They're really tough, like botulism.
Hmm.
And so
Oh wow.
yeah, so it's really low level. And so physicians recommend not to feed babies unpasteurized honey. And that's the only thing about honey that is one of the only restrictions about honey.
And is that kind of a low risk whenever it comes to honey, but a risk nonetheless?
Really low, yeah,
Really low.
yeah.
It's just one of those things you don't want to risk it for no
Botulism,
reason.
yeah, botulism is pretty serious. So
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, and it may be one of those things that's kind of gone the way of don't eat raw pork too, with the modern world and
Hmm.
different things, because you can eat raw pork
Yeah.
in the United States now if you
Hmm.
want to. The USDA keeps lowering the temperature, thankfully,
Yeah.
and so it's
I don't like my meat all fried like a
no,
beef
yeah,
jerky.
yeah, no, it's nice that we can eat pork at a lower temperature now. So
So with honey, as you were talking about it, like it's bacterial, not being able to get bacteria in it and
we can't live,
can't live.
right?
Um, was that? Do you know if it was used in the history? Was it used as a medicine?
Still is.
Still
Oh yeah,
is.
oh yeah,
Really?
yeah. There's a real. You can use any kind of honey you want, but there's an overpriced uh, product out called Meta Honey that they use in wound care.
Really?
Oh yeah, they've been doing that. They've been doing that my whole career and way before my career. Yeah, if you take a wound that won't heal and you put honey in it, um, it won't be miraculous, but
Yeah.
it won't let an infection grow in it. But as you can imagine, it's a big mess.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife is a nurse, and there was a gynecologist that used it in the 90s when she was in Little Rock, and she said it was awful to change the dressing because it's so sticky. I mean, it gets on
Oh,
everything. It gets
I'm
on everything. Yeah.
I'm sure, but I tell you what, what really blows my mind is how far we've advanced as a society technologically,
Hmm.
and yet we're still have to use some things that our ancestors used, i.e., honey, and stuff like that.
Sure. I mean,
Nature kind of has the blueprint for us.
yeah, you just got to use your brain about it.
Hmm.
I have patients all the time who say, I don't want to take anything that's not natural. And I go, I like to point out that uranium and strychnine and falling off of a cliff are all natural. And so
That's a good one.
you just have to pick. You just have to pick what's natural, what is real.
What is natural? Yeah.
Just by virtue of it being natural. There are different drugs that we use. One for thyroid disease when you're low thyroid, and one of them is a synthetic uh, thyroid hormone.
Hmm.
Most of most of those hormones are made in a lab using bacteria, so they're actually made by a living thing. But the old original one is made out of dried pig thyroids, and it's called Armor Thyroid. And if you recognize the company, that's the same people who make spam. And and so
How do you branch off from spam to
well, they
medicine?
were a meatpacking company, and they had all these pig thyroids, and then they found a need for them, and patients tend to want to use that stuff, and I go, it's fine. The trouble is it's not a good product because it's inconsistent and it's inconsistently absorbed.
Hmm.
But people have a notion that something from that would be better. But the way that we make insulins and a lot of other human hormones is pretty fascinating. We just incorporate the gene into making that hormone. We take the gene out of your pancreas that makes insulin, and we sneak it into a bacteria, and then we mass grow that bacteria and feed them sugar water, and they just make tons of insulin. That's how we make lots of things.
Really?
Yeah, we trick bacteria into making it for us.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's a process that probably they developed in the 80s or 90s or so.
Well, I think most Americans are so disconnected from what it takes, especially like in the medical field. And
Sure.
you go pick up insulin. Who thinks two thoughts about it? It's insulin.
Yeah, well, it used to be that they had big slaughterhouse-like things where they had tubes sticking in pigs, and they harvested the insulin out of the suffering poor
while
bees.
it was alive.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, about 10 years before I became a physician, that's all there was on the market were porcine and bovine insulins. They were harvested from live animals.
Oh my gosh.
So that was time consuming, expensive, and then so when some genius figured out how to make it in a big vat, that was huge.
Because that they don't do that anymore, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get I don't think you can get porcine and bovine insulins anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I haven't seen them in forever. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in some countries that I don't know of, but not in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of mad honey?
Is that
from Nepal?
Okay, so in Nepal, they would use a different bee than we use in the States. They use an open-combed bee called the giant honeybee, I think is what the name of it is. and so is it a hallucinogenic honey based on what flower they use to?
That's what they say.
Yeah, I've never. It sounds like it would be expensive.
Well, it's not. I bought some. You can buy it on Amazon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's 100% legal. I bought it just to have because
Did you?
It was curious.
Did you eat it and see God or anything?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'm going to try it. I just haven't got the bravery up to do it yet.
Yeah, it'd be really funny to put it in your wife's tea and.
Yes, here, honey.
No,
got you some coffee here. She might kill me.
Well, there are different honeys that are supposed to impart different things by virtue of their flower that they harvest from. And you can actually send a sample of your honey to different universities, like the Texas A&M, for instance, and they do I think it's called pollinography, where they look at the pollen grains inside the honey to see what your bees are using. And some beekeepers like that because they can kind of
get it down to an exact science.
Yeah, true. Or they're just pedantic. And so I mean, here in the Ozarks, our probably biggest nectar producers are trees. There are some trees that are pretty big nectar producers, like blue gums and persimmons, and blue gum is Nyssa sylvatica, or a very close cousin to the Nyssa aquatica, which is the tupelo, and everybody talks about tupelo honey. And so we have a tree in the Ozarks that we get really good honey from too.
So basically, whenever it comes to like trees and stuff, anything that has like a budding flower on it will be a way for a bee to collect nectar.
It would depend. And that kind of segues into the whole local honey is good for your allergies question.
Yeah.
So plants in nature are pollinated by multiple ways. Bugs, but mainly bugs or wind. And bugs, not always bees. Sometimes, like the pawpaw, for instance, their flowers smell like rotten meat, and so they're fly pollinated. So flies are attracted, and then they go to the next flower. So pawpaws are fly pollinated. Those nasty Bradford pears that are all over Howell County.
Yeah,
those are fly pollinated. They're not
Really?
They're not even good for honeybees. Lots of pears are bee pollinated, like Pyrus communis, the European pear, is bee pollinated.
And that's just your regular pear.
That's your pear you eat at the grocery store. Yeah, those are closely related. In fact, you can use those Bradford pears as rootstocks for. I do that at my farm. If I find one, I'll just graft a good pear onto it and make it a productive fruit tree. So the deal is that most, so the other group of plants, large group of plants that are pollinated are wind pollinated, meaning the wind blows pollen from one place to another. And those are the trees that make tons of pollen and usually account for allergies.
Oh, like when you see the yellow on your pickup.
Yeah, oak and ragweed. Those are, those are all wind pollinated plants. And so bees don't typically typically use those plants very much. They might use them for pollen some, but they're not nectar producing, and so they don't use them for nectar. So the vast majority of the flowers that a honeybee uses are not flowers that typically cause allergies. And so even if it were true that swallowing the pollen, which doesn't medically make a ton of sense to me, that swallowing the pollen that causes your allergy would help it. But people don't like having allergies, and
so that's kind of an old wives' tale.
It's probably, I don't think there's a lot of validity to it, but it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'll tell you that my local honey that I have is so much better than grocery store honey, and I didn't know it was going to be that way. I'm not a big honey eater even, but if you put it side by side, it's not even comparable.
Well, I heard something. It'd been a few weeks ago. I've been deep diving into bees and honey, and it interests me so much. We have these little creatures that it's like they speak their own language. Their group, like they want to be around each other all the time. They're have a colony or whatever, and it just fascinates me because they have like little dances they do to interact with each other. And where was I going with that?
Well, you should start to think about, okay, because you've got a bug that crawls around and eats things, and he mates with a female bug, and they lay eggs, and then more bugs come up, and they're independent bugs. Bees are completely not like that at all. It's easier to get your brain around thinking about the hive as the organism versus each individual bee as a individual. So that movie Bee Movies, that cartoon Bee Movie is ridiculous. Bees they are the perfect example of communism where everyone is okay with it, though, because everything they do is for the survival of the hive and or the multiplication of the hive without any thought, because they don't have the ability to think, without any. They are programmed to work until they die and protect the hive at all costs, but they don't think about that. They have communication in their body, like your body has communication in it with hormones and nerves and things like that. They use they use vibration and scent and visual stimuli to send signals to each other to tell each other to tell the hive or the organism of the hive how to react to the environment. I'll go to this certain area where there's a whole bunch of these flowers, or here comes, if you get stung while you're dealing with your bees, it's on, because there's a smell. There's a smell. If you smell bananas, you're in trouble.
Really?
When a bee releases when a bee releases her stinger, she gives off a chemical, and it smells kind of like bananas.
And that tells all the other bees.
The bees are very cranky after that. Yeah,
really?
So hard to get them calmed down.
So once they have that smell locked in, you're getting stung by more.
Yeah,
like,
well,
yeah.
Well, you're gonna. I mean, you got your protective stuff on, but they're gonna. They still. It's unnerving to have them diving at your face.
And they do bees have a one-time stinger where
for mammals they do.
For mammals,
okay. They have barbs on them that if they sting another bee or a bug, a wasp or something like that, they can sting them over and over again. But their barbs, when they go into mammalian skin, they stay.
Is that because our skin is so thick?
Well, it's a thing that they've evolved over the years, because it's kind of like when those missiles are shot out of the sky and out of the plane, and the guy on the ground is pointing a laser beam or the target where he wants to go. So the stinger is there releasing that chemical, and so that's kind of like the bee's laser beam for the rest of the bees to come.
I got you.
And so that's and it also sits there and pumps more venom into the animal's face, so
and swell it up nice and big.
Yeah. So skunks and bears and things like that. That's how the bees have evolved to make that happen to them.
And it seems like bears do not mind. Like I've watching videos.
They're pretty thick-skinned.
They are, and it just seems like they'll just go in for that honey, and they do not care.
Actually, the bears are not robbing the hives for the honey. That's kind of a myth too.
Really?
Yeah, they eat the larvae.
The bees.
Yeah, the baby bees.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, protein's precious, and
That's true.
you know,
And they're trying to get fat.
yeah, so they're going for the calories, and so a honey drenched baby bee is a pretty nutritionally good snack for them. So,
Yeah. Well, I remember kind of circling back from what we were talking about just a minute ago. We were talking about honey, how you said you can tell a difference from store bought honey. Well, I read recently, don't know how true it was in an AP article, but they said that most of our honey nowadays comes from China. It's imported from China.
yeah, so it's probably just sugar water.
It is. It's corn syrup. It's high fructose corn syrup.
Well,
50%.
It's probably it may not be corn syrup, but it's probably harvested from bees that are fed just a crap ton of corn syrup, because you can take HFCS and feed it directly to your bees. They'll eat the heck out of it.
Yeah, they like that,
and they'll turn it into a honey. But it's bland.
It's not your pure.
It doesn't have any flower bouquet or anything like that, So, and each honey has a different, like when I plant certain crops, I can tell. I mean, some when I plant a lot of crimson clover, that honey's nice and clear, and it crystallizes quicker than some of the other ones. If I plant buckwheat, it makes a beautiful dark honey, almost like a pale ale color, and it's really tasty too.
Yeah, like you can actually taste the difference.
And some people, like in the fall when the bees are using goldenrod, some people can't stand that honey because they think it smells like stinky feet.
Really?
But, yeah. But to each their own. But there's no bad honey. It's not like when cows eat bitterweed and it makes their the milk tastes weird.
Yeah.
There's no bad honey.
Yeah, it's all might taste a little different.
Yeah, and I'll never have a monofloral honey in my land. I can't. There would be no way to isolate because I have 10,000 different things they're going to eat. So
and so they just pick and choose what they want, and they're going.
Yeah. I mean, you could get monofloral honeys when you put them on places that are big and kind of sort of, like a giant clover field or alfalfa field or soybeans. You can get monofloral honey that way, but there's no way you could do it in the Ozarks.
And monofloral means like flower only?
No, it means one flower.
One flower.
So one crop.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So pure honey from one type of plant.
Yeah, because you see that Tupelo honey. That is honey that they think, so the beekeepers took their hives to the swamp around a bunch of Tupelo, which are nice aquatic. It's like I said, it's a cousin to our blue gum. And when those are in bloom, the bees use the heck out of them because they're big nectar producers, and so they largely make their honey when they do that out of that tree. And so, anytime you see a name before a honey, it's usually implied to be a monofloral honey like that.
Okay.
Clover honey. I mean, nobody would want to specifically buy soybean honey because that doesn't sound very. But you could. I mean, but beekeepers put bees on soybeans all the time. So yeah.
And whenever honey crystallizes, is there a way? Because I know honey stays good for. It really don't have an.
Yeah, it doesn't ruin it. No, it's not ruined different ones are worse about it. Like I said, crimson clover, they crystallize in a few months.
And can you melt it down?
Oh yeah, it's easy.
Okay.
Yeah, just gentle heat, double boiler, or a bunch of mine crystallized last year on one of those horrible hot summer days, and I just set them out on my deck on my table, on my marble table outside, and they dissolved in less than a day.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It doesn't ruin it at all. It's perfectly fine.
And we were talking about the hives. You know how you said they kind of have the we instead of the me attitude. They take care of the whole hive, one organism, if you would.
Well, as a philosophy, you should consider the beehive as the organism, not the hive, not the bee, because they are.
They're kind of like the cells in there. Doing their job.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Okay. Have you ever heard of the cordyceps, the mushrooms?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm terrible at mycology, but I've heard of those. Yeah,
it is wild. Those things, like those bees, will figure out like if one of their bees are infected with it.
Yeah,
and they will get that bee as far away from the hive as possible.
Yeah,
because if that thing was to explode inside the hive, all the bees would catch this cordyceps and it would just destroy the whole hive.
Well, there certainly are some bee diseases, and I think that I'm going to segue into something I know more about. Um, the notion that we're going to imminently lose our bees is terrifically exaggerated. I'm pretty sure honeybees will be here longer than we will be, because they're quite adaptable, and as long as there's flowers to eat, they'll be fun. They'll be here. There have been some newer diseases over the past few years, but the bees and beekeepers have to be responsible, because myself, and this is my opinion, but not shared largely by commercial beekeepers, because they mass produce beehives, they mass produce queens, they feed because they want to keep their hives alive, because they're moving them from crop to crop. They stress the heck out of the bees. They don't genetically pick for tough beehives. Like in my situation, if I've got a weak hive going into the fall, I could tank it up with sugar. I could, but it had all summer to be not weak.
Yeah.
And I don't really want those genetics moving on.
I was going to say the weak, Darwin's theory.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just let them make it or not. And if they don't, I'll just use their comb for the beehives, the other bees next year.
So. Yep. And that's nature. I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's kind of my breeding program. And so, I don't baby weak hives like a lot of people do, but the part of the reason, you hear about those big bee die-offs out west and stuff like that, those bees are treated like terribly.
Yeah.
Really, really stressful. And then when they get any kind of, in general, when you learn about beekeeping, the first question, like, what do you do about small hive beetles? You keep a strong hive.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do about keep a strong hive? The answer is always to keep your hives really strong.
The hive will do what it needs to do to survive.
Yeah.
If you have a strong hive.
Yeah. Well, they're as long as they have resources, they can deal with things better. Yeah.
And in a hive, there's only one queen at a time, correct?
Yes. Yes, sort of.
And then they have kind of like a pre-selected.
There are known instances where hives can have more than one queen laying eggs. It's not unheard of, but that's not the standard. No.
Okay.
That's yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. I don't know. It's just.
I mean, I could tell you briefly about the life cycle of.
Yeah.
So in the hive, you have three kinds of bees. Major groups. Amongst the worker bees, you have groups of them that do different jobs based on how old they are. Nurse bees, and then foragers and protectors that have different jobs, but it's based on how old they are. And so you have workers, you have drones, and you have a queen.
Okay.
And so the worker bees are all the daughters of the queen. They are genetically identical to her in every way, except that when they were little, and right after they hatched, they were not fed as much royal jelly as she was when she was little. Royal jelly is a substance that has hormones and different things in it. And what it does when they feed the royal jelly to a potential queen after the egg is hatched, they feed it longer, and that induces the ovaries of that particular bee to ripen and become viable. The rest of them are basically barren females, and they don't have the ability to make to be fertilized eggs.
Wow!
But she does, and so she grows. So if they have the notion that they're going to split their hive, swarm, or lo and behold, we detected that our queen is dead, or lo and behold, they have detected, they're not thinking about this, they just sense it.
Yeah.
Because they don't think. We have detected that our queen is past her prime and we need to replace her. So what they will do is they will pick out certain hatched eggs, and they will designate them for queenage, and they will feed them royal jelly longer than they would typically feed a future worker bee. And they will build up that cell and make it bigger, and then let's say it's a swarm. Okay, so they'll make 9 or 10, 12 queen potentials. They're called queen cells. Okay. The old queen can hear or sense that the new queens are about to come out and emerge. And so when she senses that, she sends off a signal, and about half the bees or so rally to her. And during this time, actually, she starves herself, or actually the workers starve her because she's usually too fat to fly. And so when she starves down to skinny enough to fly, then they rally, and then that half of the hive leaves, and they find a rally point on a limb. You've seen pictures. And she's in there, but they send out scouts to find a potential new home. For the beekeeper's point of view, this is free bees, because you just dump them in a tote, take them home, and then put them in a hive, and then you got a free beehive. But okay, so back at the old hive, what's happening, and this is oversimplifying it, but for demonstrative purposes, the first one to hatch out of the queen cell will typically go around as best she can and kill the rest of the potential queens, because she doesn't want any competition. Then she will leave the hive by herself, and this is a really perilous time for the hive because they don't have a mated queen, and she's out flying around as a virgin queen. So she'll fly up to mating areas up in the sky. I'm not making that up. That really is what happens, and she'll mate with multiple drones of other hives.
From other hives, or not her.
No, potentially her hive too. So it could be somewhat inbred, but she has no way of picking them. And so she gets little packets of sperm that she carries around for life inside of her, and so she fertilizes each egg as she lays it
from the sperm that she
stores it for.
That is so wild.
So she's a mated queen at that point. And so she'll come back, and then she'll start laying eggs, and then the rest of the bees beyond that are her daughters. And so it's potential that you have sperm from different drones in the same. I mean, so the genetics there are not. It's not always going to be exactly the same.
So it could have like say 3 different packets of sperm in there,
from different drones. Yeah, and so the drones are mistakenly called males. They are not males. A little bit of an esoteric biology term that they're technically gametes, because gametes, G-A-M-E-T-E.
Okay.
A gamete is one half of what it takes to make a baby.
Really?
Yeah. So an egg and a sperm, those are gametes.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're flying gametes is what I call them, because what they are, how they are produced is the queen lays an unfertilized. She's able to pick and choose. She takes an unfertilized egg and lays that. And so a drone technically has it has her genetic material, but it doesn't have a complete set of genetic material to become a true bee.
And that's where you get the drones.
That's where the drones are. That's what drones are. So they have one job, and that's it. So the hive will make maybe 5% of them will be drones, but they're completely just parasites.
And so they don't contribute to the hive at all.
No, they don't even feed themselves. And so, the queen doesn't feed herself either. But their only job in life is to mate with virgin queens in the sky.
They got a hell of a life, don't they?
Well, not really, because in the fall, the bees know. Well, the bees have evolved over time.
Yeah.
That when the weather starts to get cold, they realize that those drones are just a liability and not going to contribute to getting through the winter. And so the bees will actually eject the drones in the fall.
Really? So they have a short lifespan.
The drones can live most of the summer, but they get kicked out.
What is the average lifespan of a bee?
If you were in a climate, depending on environment, 2 or 3 months. But
that's it.
Yeah, bees here in Arkansas, or excuse me, here in the Ozarks. I'm not in Arkansas.
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough. But bees in the Ozarks live. The ones that go into the winter, they live 4 or 5 months because they live through the winter. And because you can't. They don't. The queen does not reproduce through the winter time.
Okay, so they kind of lie dormant in the winter.
No, they don't hibernate. They basically get in a ball and shiver.
I've heard of this.
And eat honey. That's what they do with the queen in the middle.
Okay, so basically, whenever they're in the spring and summertime, when they're out there working, collecting, collecting honey, getting their nectar and everything. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that for wintertime because all they do is survive.
That's it. Yeah. They'll eat honey in the summertime in what we call a dearth, which was last summer. They'll eat honey if there's nothing else to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of their so that's why you've never heard of apple honey, because they use all of that energy from apple blossoms this time of year, or it's a little past peak for apple blossoms, for the energy of building up in the spring. So they don't really store apple nectar.
So they just eat it,
use it as they go.
Wow, because it's probably one of the highest.
Well, it's what's available when they need it early.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That is super interesting. Can you imagine, like we were just talking about how the sperm packs inside different sperm. Could you imagine if humans did that? There'd be a lot of child support laying around.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would
that would be a problem.
Mammalian sperm is so fragile, though, so it would take a little bit of doing, because it's so fragile it can't even live inside of the human body. So, I'm glad we don't have.
Yeah, that'd be horrible.
I'm glad we have to try each time.
Yeah,
it's more fun anyway. That
exactly.
way.
Wow, these bees, they are so fascinating.
Pretty amazing, yeah.
That this creature that's been around for millions.
Oh yeah,
millions of years.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I didn't know that they weren't native to the United States.
Nope.
That we brought them with us. Did we have different pollinators here, like before the bees?
Oh sure.
Okay, so bees aren't the only thing that pollinates.
Oh, definitely not.
Okay, so like moths,
birds, butterflies,
okay,
flies.
So all those are still pollinators.
Absolutely. And we have a bunch of bees that pollinate that are native. All the bumbles.
Honeybees are not native.
Honeybees are not native. No.
But
there is a stingless bee in Mexico called the Melipona bee. That makes honey, and it is a native bee to Central America.
Okay.
But that's the only bee I believe in North America that stores enough honey to eat. Like say for instance, bumbles, pretty neat. They don't keep workers through the winter. The queen is the only one that lives through the winter.
Really?
So you see in the springtime, you see those great big fat giant bumblebees. That's a queen.
Real loud.
That's a queen flying around getting ready to lay enough eggs so that her offspring can get her through the winter.
Wow. So every spring she has to lay these eggs
she has to build up her workforce every yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah, but bumbles are great pollinators too. So there's lots of different kinds of bumblebees, and then everybody hates mason bees because, well, you probably call them carpenter bees. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that dig into your house, and that's a little irritating. But then there's lots of squash bees and all kinds of different bees that were here because like the squashes are native to North America, so something was pollinating them before honeybees came here. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
never thought about it like that. It's just, I don't know. I guess when you think pollinator, you automatically think of honeybees.
Sure,
or I do anyway.
Well, the thing is that let's talk about fruit trees. The temperate fruit trees that we eat every day, and I mean not tropical fruits, but the temperate fruits, pears, apricots, apples, peaches, things like that. Almost every one of those came from the same area in the world, and it's technically in Asia, but it's in an area kind of around Armenia and Azerbaijan, sort of east of Turkey, in that zone there. Okay. Georgia.
Yeah.
That's where almost all of our fruit trees came from originally.
Really?
Yeah, it was just kind of a Goldilocks area for fruit trees to evolve in, and then almost all of them originally came from kind of that area, and they had European honeybees there, and so they are very happy to have European honeybees here because that's what they're used to.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that fruit originated over there.
Yep. Most of our temperate fruits are in kind of Western Asia.
It is kind of mind-boggling whenever you start learning like this how much stuff is not native here that has been brought in.
Oh, absolutely.
It's wild.
Sure. Tons of stuff, things that you wouldn't even think of. There aren't very many. Oh yeah, we don't eat a lot of native, like cranberries. That would be one that we eat that's native. Grapes. There's some grapes that we eat that are native. But the grapes that we make wine out of and eat on the table are not native. Those are those are from those are not. But they don't. They're commercial grapes too. So yeah.
That's wild. And now, so grapes, do they bud? Now, would that be a food for a bee?
Bees don't use grapes.
They
don't use grapes.
Hmm.
No, and so I can't remember exactly why, but they're so our commercial apples and pears and all those sorts of things. A lot of those things are self-infertile.
Mm-hmm.
They have tons of pollen and they have everything they need, but they don't respond to their own pollen. And so a lot of apple varieties absolutely cannot pollinate themselves without honeybees because they have to get pollen from some completely different variety of apple.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you can look at a chart, if you decide what apples to get, like if you just get apples willy-nilly, and this makes everything more complicated. It always is. But if you just get apples willy-nilly and you grow them, you have this glorious apple orchard and you never get an apple and you don't know why.
No pollinators.
Well, pollinators, yes, but they bloom at wrong times, and so they don't pollinate each other, and so you have to actually get pollinating compatible apples growing near each other to get exactly. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean,
that's kind of a crazy evolutionary process.
Well, all of our edible apples are artificially constructed anyway. They've been bred.
Really?
Yeah. The original apple is this little bitty bitter crabapple tasting thing. And we
so these sweet fruits we get, they're man-made or
cross-pollinated. Bred. They're about as man-made as a Jersey cow, Gotcha, I mean, but it's the same deal, The thing that's cool about fruit trees, and I mentioned it a little bit before, is that every single, like say for instance, Granny Smith apple tree that you've ever seen in your life that has ever existed is a direct clone descendant of the very first Granny Smith apple tree that was found in the rubbish pile of a lady named Smith in Australia. It was found to be a pretty good apple, and
everyone loves them.
Everybody likes those, but in order to clone an apple, you don't plant seeds. You actually take a piece of the stick off of the apple and stick it on another on a rootstock and clone it that way.
Really? Mm-hmm. So you take the root and then you get a piece of the apple.
Nope, piece of the tree.
Oh, a piece of the tree.
Yeah. Okay. So the way that it works is that you have a desirable. They figured out how to make the root systems that are a desirable trait. Okay, and they grow those for rootstock. And then in the wintertime, they go out on the desired apple tree and they cut little sticks off of it.
I've seen that.
Those are called scions. So you have rootstocks and scions. And then about this time of year, what you can do is you can, through some special techniques, they're not that hard. You can take the rootstocks and you can attach them to the scions or vice versa, and then seal it all up and make sure this good and watertight with various things. Put the the rootstocks in a pot, and the wound between the scion and the rootstock will heal, and then the scion will start to grow, and then eventually will become a clone of that apple that you desired.
Wow. An exact, like you said,
direct clone, yes.
That is wild.
Yeah.
So it's all the same tree. Technically.
It's directly descended without any change from the original apple that they found, literally in the trash pile of a lady named Smith in Australia.
And that's how we got
that's how I got Granny Smith apples. Lord. Yeah, there's happy accidents like Granny Smith apples, and then a lot of them are bred, like Liberty apples are bred by like the University of Michigan or something, bred them specifically to try and make to make a desirable apple.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is wild. These, man, I tell you what, Nate, we're getting back a little bit. People think that, I don't know, whenever you go into a grocery store or something and you pick up an apple, you don't really think about the process of the apple being grown. And like you said, taking the root stem and what was the other part called?
The rootstock and the scion.
Yeah, the scion, and getting an apple that's an exact clone of all the other apples.
Yeah.
That there's such a huge process that goes into just these normal everyday groceries that we get.
Sure.
And you never really even think to wonder about it.
Well,
You know?
it's pretty. We get kind of awed by the Elon Musks and the people like that, and they're pretty cool people and do a lot of pretty neat things. But smart guys and gals are not new.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really clever people in our history that came up with some really important things.
Yes.
A lot of times through trial and error, but then just experience and like whoever figured out that you could take a stick from one tree and stick it on another.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Could you imagine trying to figure that? Whoever figured that out for the first time?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Happy accident, probably a guy, because you can see grafting in nature. Like if two trees of the same species grow too close together, then they'll kind of become one tree.
Yep.
Especially certain kinds. And so, happy accidents, like, well, what if I took, and that sort of thing. Or it probably started off where he had the apple that he liked, and he had an apple that he didn't. It wasn't going to make. It wasn't going to be anything good.
Yeah.
It was just a seedling, and maybe he put them together and like tied them together, and then when it finally started or something, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But and then cut it off, but somebody finally figured out that you don't even have to go to. You just cut the green stick off, and as long as you keep them cold in the refrigerator, they come back to life in the spring.
Really, they have to be cold?
Well, they
thrive in
the scions. When I do that, I put my scions in the fridge because you cut them when the tree's dormant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then you put it out in the springtime whenever
when buds start to
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you think so, because not a lot of people. I don't know. So a lot of people do, but it's a little esoteric for some folks.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a crazy guy. Whenever I start like looking at something, I'll just like honeybees. I just started looking at them probably 6 months ago, and I'm trying to learn all I can about them now. Like they fascinate. The whole, like you were talking about, the hive being
the organism.
That just, it interests me because you can see a lot of similarities, I guess, between honeybees and humans even.
Sure. Well, honeybee hives. Sure.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm going to say anything.
Oh, but I was saying, like, like if you look at it, and this might be a little bit of a depressive view of it, but like the worker bees, what do? They work, they go home, they feed their queen.
Yeah, but you watch that cartoon, and it's not realistic. They don't have a plight. They don't sit around and foment revolution because they're overworked or anything like that.
So you don't think are they conscious? Do you think?
They're not. There's no way. There's no way that they could be sapient at all. They're assuredly sentient, but not sapient. Meaning, because sentiency is necessary for an animal to work through the environment. You have to be able to sense things. You have to be able to feel things, or it's not good. And so, I mean, that's sort of some of the animal rights people's notion, is that they don't eat anything that can feel. And but I don't know that they don't know that corn doesn't feel something. I mean, they can't tell you about it, but I mean, I don't know.
A lot of those animal rights, and don't get me wrong, mass slaughterhouses and stuff, it can get kind of bad.
Sure.
But at the same time, I wish they would look at nature and realize nature isn't this storybook fairy tale where
it's I don't know, city people.
It is. Well, it's people that are so disassociated away from
they are people that are definitely disassociated away from life, and so in the way that things move through the world and exist. I don't know. I make people angry sometimes from a medical standpoint. Humans are technically obligate omnivores, and boy, howdy, do I get hollered at for that.
Especially in today's age.
Well, the vegan would not be able to exist in today's world if not for
supplements.
B12 supplements, exactly, and who knows what else. And I tell my patients that, and certainly a vegan diet is a lot more healthy than the average American diet, but humans are obligate omnivores. And I give them this example. Okay, I don't know, but we've done a ton of studies on vitamins because everybody wants to take them, and you just think, well, it's like Roundup in my sprayer. If this much is good, then
that's scary stuff.
double of it'll kill even more stuff. Anyway, so if you do a study and you take people and you give them high doses of vitamin A in pill form,
the body will only absorb a certain amount.
Well,
right?
it'll absorb too much, actually,
Okay.
vitamin A. And actually, people who take vitamin A supplements are actually not healthier than anyone else, or maybe actually unhealthier. But if you eat foods that are really, really high in vitamin A, beta carotene, squash, carrots, things like that, you're obviously much more healthy. So I think we don't completely understand what goes all along with the vitamins. And so I bring that example back to B12.
Yeah.
If you don't eat animal protein and you rely on a pill to supply that one nutrient, because humans can't make B12, we have to get it from animal products or a pill. And so I don't know what else we're missing if you're not eating lean animal protein.
It's kind of a perfect metaphor
Yeah.
for how today's society is as far as take the pill.
Well, I work every day in a world where people do really seek now that their ability to get better or to stay healthy could be predicated not on any sort of effort, but rather by virtue of a potion or a pill or something like that. And it just doesn't work that way. It's still, everybody, the latest thing is these injectable medicines you do them once a week, and they do cause weight loss.
Dude, let's talk about that.
But they make you puke up your shoes, man.
I've heard a lot of scary things about.
They're going to be fantastic drugs for people with diabetes. There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
But they're not for everyone. And
that's what it's made for, is for diabetic people.
Yeah, for type 2 diabetics. Yeah, people that don't use their insulin right, because those people, if they lose weight, and so the revolution in diabetic medicines in the last 10 or 12 years has been to focus on the disease of type 2 diabetes, which the disease is not high blood sugar. The disease is not using insulin correctly, or
so your body doesn't know what to do with the insulin?
Well, it just doesn't use it right.
Just doesn't use it right.
Okay. And so you have really, really high levels of insulin because your body tells you need even more out there because your sugar is so high. And high levels of insulin cause all kinds of issues with metabolism and fat deposition and all that sort of thing.
So type 2 diabetes is an abundance of insulin?
No, type 2 diabetes is a lack of it's insulin resistance. Okay. And so by virtue of that, your pancreas senses that your sugar is high and releases super high amounts of insulin in an effort to overcome that resistance. Type 1 diabetes is completely unrelated. But they have the same result, high blood sugar. Type 1 diabetes is when the insulin producing cells in the pancreas, for whatever reason, usually autoimmune, that we think it's autoimmune, they give it up and stop making insulin.
Really?
Yeah.
And so what's the name of that shot, the medicine in it?
Well, the latest is called without I don't want to denigrate their brand, but Mounjaro was the one that came out lately, where it was kind of a bait and switch on folks. Somehow that happens where they some people, maybe some of these tele things that you hear about on the radio, I think they marketed it for obesity because they had some sort of way of getting it cheap, and then they kind of pulled the rug out from under everybody, because when they come to me wanting it, and if you try to give it to them for obesity, their insurance won't pay for it. It'll only pay for it if it will pay for it for diabetes. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like an off-script type use.
Well, Mounjaro is not indicated for weight loss that I know of. No, but it does work. It's extremely common and not bad, but we use drugs all the time for for their side effect.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a really proven way to lose weight, people, without having to take a shot. Do some sit-ups.
Well, yeah.
Because to me,
I think people should focus more on being fit than anything else.
Yes.
But anything worth having is worth working for, and so people want. I don't blame them. I mean, everything else is easy right now.
Well, we live in a throwaway, easy society where, okay, this is all new. We have not lived in houses with air conditioner and lights, f- what, 100 years
I
maybe.
don't know. My grandparents didn't have air conditioning until I was probably 20 years old. So
Exactly. And for some reason, our society is under the assumption that this is here to stay.
mm,
It could take one natural disaster of a planetary uh, size to
well,
knock us back to
in that.
being hunter and gatherers.
Oh yeah, the yeah,
It scares me.
yeah. Well, I got my buddy Tom. He's a graphic artist. He's a super cool guy. But he says, Cochran, when the end times come, I'm coming to your house.
Enough said there, right?
Well,
Heck yeah.
I can hunt, I can fish, I can grow things, and I'm a doctor, and so I'd be pretty handy
Exactly.
in the apocalypse. And so
Isn't that
I could trade a lot of cigarettes and whiskey.
barter is going to be? It is a scary thing to think about in our society, thinking about how we're losing the skill of hunting, fishing, planting your own food, growing your own food. It's like it's it's becoming almost taboo to do.
Yeah, around here,
Yes.
yeah, and it's kind of cool to see some folks sort of. I mean, I'm going to be a half full kind of guy on that subject because I see people trying, and
Mhm.
my job is to be kind of evangelical about that
Yeah.
because people go, oh, I don't, it's like, no, you don't have to start with a 2-acre garden. You just get you a raised bed and start with,
Something
start
easy.
with squash, cucumbers,
Learn your way through it.
couple tomato plants, and it's a crazy fun, and so the latest thing I was like, I told you bees were last year's chickens because everybody's got chickens right now,
Yeah.
which I can't have animals because my wife won't like that if we have to kill things.
Yeah.
No.
That's how mine is.
She's
She's fine eating it. Doesn't want to see it.
no, she's got a beautiful soul, and she will eat deer meat until until it's gone. But she does not want to be a part of the meat harvesting process,
Yep.
and that's fine.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
fine. Yeah.
Absolutely. The great thing is about the time we live in is you don't have to be a part of that.
No, but um, we my meat budget went through the roof when my wife read the book it was a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma.
Yeah.
And it talks about slaughterhouses and corn and all this stuff. And so now my meat's a lot more expensive, but it's pretty cool because I like to support local farmers and lots of folks growing nice, healthy, grass-fed animals around. And
Yeah.
we got some good, like Newman Farms in Myrtle that grows amazing cruelty-free pork. That's just so good.
And that to me, that's the most important thing is the cruelty free.
Yeah.
My freezer in there. Every year, me and we have 4 kids together.
Yeah.
And so a lot of food. So we slaughter a whole beef once a year, and we always go to a small farmer.
Yeah.
Usually someone my grandpa knows or something,
Sure.
and he'll put it up and he'll feed it for a few months, send it off, butcher it, and it is cheaper than going to the store. I mean,
yeah.
I wish people around here or just in general could get in a mindset of support your local farmer. If there's 3 or 4 families that are needing meat, everyone go in together to get a.
You can split them.
Yeah, exactly. But
because I can't do that. I have just Nick and me at home, so I can't get a whole beef.
Exactly. Yeah, but like if you had 4 families, quarter it up or something, like that'd be perfect. But we're so used to, what are we eating for dinner? Let's do spaghetti. Okay, I'll run to the store and grab a pack of hamburger. Grab it, come over, cook it. And what kind of meat is that?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that comes from.
It if you ever pick up a package of that and look at it and how pink it is, it doesn't look normal.
Yeah. I like good quality things from folks I know. Yeah.
Have you had Wagyu?
I have not.
Buddy.
I like beef, but I have not had that.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
It'll ruin you.
Yeah, it's kind of like ice cream in Italy. I don't eat ice cream anymore because I lived in Italy and ate gelato for 6 months.
Oh, so amazing, ain't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. But me and the wife, I can't remember. We were out and about for some reason. We went up to a restaurant that had Wagyu, and it's expensive. We're not rich, so we split it was like a 20 ounce, plenty to split. Came with shareable sides, and all they do is salt and pepper it, and it blows your mind. The taste, just buttery, tender. Take a spoon through it.
Yeah,
Oh.
I've always loved to experiment with different cooking things, and Nikki, my wife, she's really awesome cook too. So we that's one of the things that we love to do is cook together. I've recently gotten into sous vide.
Oh, that's good, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can take a cheap eye of round and turn it into in a day. You can turn it into basically
Filet.
prime rib. Yeah, it's so good. I did one for about 8 hours one time, and then just seared it hot on the grill.
Get that char on it,
and then sliced it up. It was like prime rib.
Oh, I've been experimenting recently with a coffee rub. I'd never heard of putting coffee on meat.
I hadn't either.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I got deer meat.
Yeah.
If you want some good deer meat,
yeah,
you take your salt, pepper, garlic salt if you want, and then you rub it in coffee, let it set, kind of get room temp, and then reverse sear it is what I do. So you put it in the oven or on your smoker at 375 for like 45 minutes. Then you take it out, pipe in hot pan, grill that or bust that crust on there.
Wow.
That's
cool.
And you don't taste the coffee.
That's cool.
Got like an earthy spice to it.
That's really cool. Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. Coffee's pretty neat plant.
It is.
Yeah.
And
my buddy brought me some of that Kopi Luwak coffee home one time. He works for an NGO, Heifer, and he was in Southeast Asia and Indonesia. And he brought me, I guess it's not as bad over there, but it's that coffee that is like the world's most expensive coffee. Have you heard about it? So it's been crapped through an animal.
They pick it out of that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it was really good coffee, but I mean, I don't know if it was worth what they pay for it, but it was pretty yummy.
Did you ever have a mental picture of just knowing you're eating? Drinking shit?
What I do for a living,
True.
You just kind of work through. It's easy to work through. I do colonoscopies, for goodness sake.
Oh Lord.
So they are very cleaned off and they are very roasted, so everything's good.
Everything's gone off of it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, doing colonoscopies. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I can handle blood and guts and everything just fine, but I can't handle waste.
well, you can handle anything if you do it long enough.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You kind of get used to it.
Yeah. In medical school, you get kind of thrown in the deep end right off the bat. I'm going to give gross anatomy in the first day, and then there's a dead person laying there that you have to work on for the next semester. So,
cadavers.
Yeah, a lot of medical schools don't do that anymore, and that's fine. But that was day one. We had to start cutting on this guy we just met who was laying there dead. So
was that hard?
Not for me.
No,
not for me. Like I said, I grew up on a farm.
Yeah,
and
kind of used to that.
Yeah.
Stuff. Do you have to almost kind of like disconnect yourself from what you're doing?
No, you don't want to disconnect as a physician, and you develop as a physician. You develop a muscle in your inside you that if you disconnect your empathy and your sympathies from your patient, then you're not. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right. But what you develop is a muscle that you can keep it together. I mean, I had my nurse ask me. She's like, how can you tell people such horrible news or tell them that they're going to die and all this stuff? And I was like, well,
you have to,
because if I got it, I mean, there's only one way to do that, and that's the right way. And if I do it wrong, then I haven't done what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
So you just develop a muscle that helps you get through that. And if you ever disconnect from it, then you need to go find another job.
Yeah, that's something that's not good to do.
Yeah,
I can see that, especially coming at it from like the compassion standpoint and stuff. Yeah. Telling someone, you almost got to have that.
yeah. I've been doing it I graduated from medical school in 1998. So, but
where'd you graduate from?
University of Arkansas.
Okay. Oh, cool. So back in the home state, huh?
Well, at that time there was only one medical school in Arkansas, and so it's perfectly fine medical school. So I did my residency in Kansas City, but
nice.
It's you get pretty good at it if you do it for a long time. So yeah, you mentioned in one of your notes about artificial intelligence in medicine. What did you want? What do you want?
Yes. So it's just me being crazy and I'm thinking constantly. But have you seen Chat GPT? Have you messed with it at all?
I haven't messed with it. I
It's
don't
scary.
really want to get my hands on it at all, frankly.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
It's got me worried. Well, they just came. Chat GPT, which is version 3, came out. I want to say January. It wasn't that long ago. Well, they have Chat GPT 4 now.
Okay.
It's a million times better than 3 was.
Mm-hmm.
In just a few months, it can. You tell it to write a medical paper on whatever subject, and I guarantee you'll go through it and give it a good grade.
Yeah.
It's that scary. Do you think there's going to come a day with how our technology is advancing, and it evolves even more year to year, just 10 times more than what it should be, in my opinion. It's just crazy. And it's almost like humans are the bee for the machines.
Well, okay, here's what I think about.
Do you think basically what my question is do you think the medical field itself will end by not needing humans?
Okay. Well, I think anything's possible, I suppose.
Yeah.
The thing about it is that the decision-making involved in clinical care is so subtle and so different from person to person, because one of the things that I do is I interpret people's complaint. And I'll give you an example. Dizzy. Dizzy is kind of like the opposite of the Eskimo description of snow. Dizzy is a word that describes about 50 different things.
True.
And so when a patient comes in and says, I'm dizzy, so if he mentions that into a computer, I'm dizzy, well, the computer doesn't know what to do with that, because you have to dig deeper. Because are you feeling like the room is spinning? Do you feel like you're going to pass out? Do you feel like you're spinning? There's about a million ways of feeling dizzy. And so it'll be a long time before the clinical decision-making is taken away from humans, if it is.
Yeah.
But there are some medical specialties that are, I hope, to be augmented by AI, but certainly have the potential to be maybe displaced.
Yeah.
The ones that don't involve clinical care or clinical decision-making or clinical skills, meaning surgeries, practicing physicians that treat patients with medicines and order tests and all that stuff. Those are the medical specialties where they're interpretive. And so the two that come to mind are radiology and pathology. Okay. Because a radiologist that doesn't do intervention, like put in stuff and stuff, that just looks at radiographs and interprets them, that's very possibly to be done by a computer at some point. And pathology is the same. You can look at a microscope. They look at slides and interpret what those slides look like: cancer, not cancer, what kind of cancer, that sort of thing. And so those interpretive specialties are, I don't know. I don't want to say, I want to be half full kind of guy again and say they are on the verge of, I think, being very augmented by something like artificial intelligence. And so
it scares the shit out of me.
Okay.
I mean, it does.
Sure.
Just seeing how that Chat GPT just interacts with humans. And, we're talking about like interpretation, like you get the data, interpret it.
Yeah.
Man,
I don't know. Sometimes I think that those, when you get friended on Facebook by somebody who's already your friend, and if you're bored, you can talk to them. I'll friend them again and talk to them a little bit. I think sometimes those are bots.
I do too.
Because they really are stupid.
They are.
They're stupid about how they don't. Okay, so because they'll say things to me and I'll go, "How are you?" And it's like my cousin that I talked to yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm terrible. I had to have my penis amputated. It's a terrible day. It's the worst thing ever. And they're like, have you heard the good news? I said, did you just hear what I said? They said, no, so there's no good news. I had my penis amputated yesterday. It's gone. And then just keep going. They're going to have to do the Chat GPT stuff is going to have to get better than that. So I'm sure it is.
What worries me about it, like you said, getting better. I agree 100%. But, usually, say our government, military, whatever branch, they're usually about 50 years ahead of us technologically.
Yeah.
So what I get to worrying about at night, because I'm scared to death of AI, because I watch The Matrix and I see us, like you said, integrating well, you said augment, but I'm saying I see us eventually integrating to where we don't even breed anymore because we're half machine.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you seen the Neuralink stuff that they're trying to come out with?
Well, I think that they're, to if they could make a paraplegic walk again,
Be amazing.
yeah. And so it's just like it's like a lot of the thing. I mean, we've had dangerous technology since we
Yeah.
picked up a rock,
Yeah.
and so just as we grow as a society and as a group, we have to do the best that we can, not necessarily to be a Luddite about new things, but
Yeah.
rather just make sure that we're responsible humans and do the best we can to keep that stuff under control. Because I mean, like I said, the very first dangerous technology that was a rock. That
Yeah.
guy picked up, and he had lots of things he could do wonderfully with that rock, and lots of horrible things he could do with it too. So
What scares me is, it seems like we always end up boring. In one way or another, we end up using all the technology we have in a war of some sort. Nuclear power. We could have used that for clean energy, 100%.
well, historically, the impetus to innovate is certainly fueled by the desire not to lose a war. I expect.
Yes.
I don't claim to be an expert on that sort of thing,
Mhm.
but to take the technologies that we have developed through the military and turn them into life-saving good things.
Yep.
That'd be the long-term goal,
So
I think.
you take an optimistic approach on AI and just technology in general.
Well, I take a long-term history view on the thing.
Yeah.
We have had the ability to destroy ourselves for a long time.
Yeah.
And somehow we keep plugging on.
The peace bomb, that's the nuclear bomb was a blessing and a curse.
Well, that, and also the overcrowding and bubonic plagues and all of the things that have happened to us as a species. I mean, we forgot how to make concrete for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
When the Western Roman Empire fell, they forgot how to make concrete for 1,000 years, and so we're going to have a downturn. We're going to have something horrible happen, and things are going to go backwards for a little bit. I hope I'm not around, but I mean, the history says that humans are going to persevere.
Yes.
But then also history, or at least natural history, says that our time as a species on any planet is finite.
Yes.
So just, I don't know, I'm kind of fatalistic about it, I guess.
I guess my main, worry, and I think about it a lot. I mean, I do. I think about a lot of things a lot.
Sure.
I'm a student to just learning. And that's why I try to take the approach as I'm always trying to learn new things.
Well, you can't sit around and worry about the day that the sun goes into red giant mode and just melts us all. I mean, I don't know when that's going to happen.
But what exactly? We could have a big old solar flare tomorrow that just knocks us out.
Sure. Or a meteor like the one that got rid of the dinosaurs.
Exactly.
Sure.
And Yellowstone. Take Yellowstone, for example,
I've heard
the super volcano underneath it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's due.
Sure.
But with AI, to me, it seems like it's one of those Pandora box moments. Like once it's out of the box, is it possible to put it back in? You know what I mean? Because if it does gain sentience, and by sentience, whether that be consciousness, what is consciousness? You get in that debate.
Yeah.
But if it gains sentience, it's like, okay, well, what do you want me as an AI to do? Bring peace on Earth. What's the only way to bring peace? Oh, well,
I see what you're saying.
Take out the humans.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't even have any ability in my expertise level to have a really great opinion about that, frankly. But I know that we are, I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have cell phones, and so we are not doing a terrible job. Going from when I was 5 years old, you had card catalogs and Dewey Decimal Systems, and people had encyclopedias in their house that were out of date already, to having everything that anyone ever knew in the palm of your hand all the time.
Age of information.
Yeah, so it was going to be it's going to be a transition as a species, but I don't know. Some bad things are going to happen, but I'm optimistic for the long term.
In the long term, I think humans always prove that the good the good outweighs the bad. The
Well,
good people end up most of the time.
The desire to not be dead is kind of the thing that keeps people going forward.
Yeah,
So,
I mean that's a good way to put it.
yeah. So whatever we have to do to survive this, that puts people in a. So I can't change any of that stuff. The sun, if the sun goes super red giant, and I'll just watch it
We'll get a hell of a sunburn.
I'll just watch it from my apiary. I've got too much. I got too much in the here and now that I do have to worry about. That I have learned to sort of focus on the things I can do something about. So
I like that.
Yeah,
I need to learn to do that more instead of trying to worry about things you can't control.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was younger, sure, gosh, I grew up in the '80s, and this movie came out. You got to watch it sometime. It's not that great of a movie, but it's horrible. It was called The Day After.
The Day After.
And it had a pretty ensemble cast. It was on TV. It wasn't on it wasn't on in the movies. And it took place in Lawrence and Kansas City, and it was about escalating things, and then that thing that we were always worried about in the '80s, it happens in this movie where the Russians attack us and we attack them back. And so there's just, there's these scenes where all these missiles are coming up out of the ground, and
I've seen this.
And then the bombs hit, and then and it doesn't have a happy ending.
Yeah,
it's awful.
Very nihilistic approach.
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah, and so I shouldn't have watched that movie when I was like 10 years old, because it haunted me for the next who knows how long. Because I thought I can't do anything about the Russians blowing us to kingdom come.
Yeah.
But what if it happens? What am I going to do? I mean, and so that's a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress already. And so, I've got a business in Mammoth Spring, and I've got parents that I'm taking care of, and children, and all that stuff. And
the important things.
Kind of trying to focus down on that right now.
Yeah.
And so, and then some hobbies that make me happy. And so I'll move through that,
that you almost got to find the things that you find joy in. You have your job, but then you have to have that you find joy in.
Good food, ice cold beer on a hot summer afternoon.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that, I don't know that I have the gravitas to change the things that I wish I could change.
Yeah.
But I know I can make a huge difference in my little town, and that's why.
And you have.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. It's been fun moving back home. I've always lived there, but practicing at home has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Does that come with a certain amount of stressors that you wouldn't have doing it in a town you're not from, as far as knowing some of them?
Well, you got to get used to that, because I lanced a hemorrhoid on a girl I graduated high school with today. So, I mean, that's just part of the deal. So
yeah, I had one of those down in Key West. We went to Key West last year. Yeah.
Bless your heart.
We went for our honeymoon.
Thrombosed external hemorrhoids, pretty miserable. Yeah.
Oh my God. The worst part of it was the needle going up there. Oh man.
Well, yeah.
I felt nothing like that.
We do the best we can to make that as painless as possible, but
I didn't know I was able to make a noise like I did. I mean, it was...
yeah, it's not a place you want a needle. Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. What about, we were talking about the 80s. Do you feel now in the 80s, do you feel like the similar feel of what was you guys were worried about with Russia back then versus to what we're kind of feeling now with Russian-Ukraine time?
No. From my point of view, the Russians aren't nearly as scary as they used to be, because we see how, and I always had smart military type people tell me how crappy their stuff was, and it turns out it is.
Yeah. Outdated.
Yeah, and bad. I have a cousin who's an engineer, and he's like, I know their steel is bad, and their everything. It's not, and it kind of is looking like that. Of course, they still have nuclear weapons, and I guess they'll make it over here. So
maybe. Yeah. That's another thing we need to take into account is how old are they? How are they being maintained?
Yeah. Yeah. I sure hope it never even get to find out. But but I think we were in the original Cold War, we were led to believe that they were on par with us, and a lot of people knew that they weren't, but still dangerous, obviously. But no, I think this is a different time for sure.
Yeah, and I the Cuban crisis was probably the closest we got to actually having
I guess historically, sure.
World War III.
That was pretty. Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff. That was before my time, though.
Yeah,
So,
but with what's going on in Ukraine, it's almost, how do I say it? It's almost that they've been fighting borders for ever.
yeah,
This is nothing new.
yeah. I don't know that they've got that whole. I mean, because I'm not an expert in the history of Russia and the countries around Russia, but uh, they haven't gotten their national things lined out, because I mean, we take it for granted, but the United States is older than Italy.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've been a country for so long, and some of these places are, Ukraine has barely been a country for any time at all.
Yeah.
So
90s.
But yeah, when the Soviet Union kind of broke down.
Yeah, 96.
But they haven't been independent for very long, so they're getting those things. It'll take some time to get those things lined out.
Yep, it sure will. And that's just, I hope it ends soon.
No kidding.
It's like, I don't know. I've just never felt so much stress day to day. As far as I don't watch news.
Yeah,
I haven't watched news in 2 years.
Uh-oh.
I can't do it. It scares me.
I listen to the blurb of the news, but my wife sits in front of the TV and watches the news as the bad news channel. I was like, golly, I can't see how you do this.
I used to do that. Man, I just stress myself out for nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing I could control.
Yep.
But, well, man, I appreciate you coming on and talking.
Okay.
This was really good.
Hopefully not vapid. Hopefully there's a little bit of substance to it.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
There was a lot here.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime you want to come on to talk, man, I'd love to have you.
What gave you the idea to get this going anyway?
Well, I've been working on it for over a year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I started it. I love talking to people. I love learning new, interesting subjects.
Sure.
And we have so many cool people in our small towns.
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah.
And I decided I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to set up a studio, and I'm going to talk to people who never have a chance to get their story told. There's a lot of people around here that have done some amazing things in the world.
Yeah.
And they live their life quietly, unbothered by anyone. And when you start talking to them, it's pretty amazing what they've went through in their life.
It's this is not me saying I do amazing things, but you'd be so surprised about how, I went to the same schools as the guys in the city, and I went to the same residencies, and I took the same tests that they took. And it's so funny when you talk to them from here, and it's sort of this, and I have an accent, so it doesn't help, but they just sometimes, I just remember through my career, like talking to I was transferring a patient from West Plains to Kansas City or Springfield or something like that. And I was talking to some kid who was still a resident, and he was being so condescending. And I could just, because
was he condescending you like for being from around here?
No, because he was quite certain that there was no way I could possibly have chosen to practice medicine in West Plains, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
Because it must be the only
small town.
It must be the only place that I could get a job.
Oh, one of those people.
And that was the notion, is that, but he didn't say that. It's just, he just oozed it, and so. We get small town people can get a chip on their shoulder, but most of the time we just we just move through it.
It seems like these small towns, a lot of people, they've never, and I'm not saying anything bad on small towns. I love my small town. Love them. Love my people. It seems like they've just, for one reason or another, it escaped them to get out and see more of the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, insular people are not new. Historically, they were forced to be insular because they couldn't go anywhere. But now,
it's such a beautiful world.
It's there's safety staying home, and they got other things they'd rather do. But yeah, it's to get out and experience things kind of makes me more happy to be home. So.
Oh yeah. Well, me and my wife, one thing we do every year without fail is me and her will go on a vacation, just me and her, without our kids.
Yeah.
Just to kind of focus on us. And, we try to see a new place. This year, we're trying to go to the Vatican.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. I'm not Catholic, but I would love to see it.
It's pretty amazing.
Have you been there?
Yeah. I lived in Rome for 6 months.
Wow. That's right. You said that.
Yeah.
What was it? Did you go tour it?
We went to the Vatican probably 2 or 3 times a month.
The art.
Oh yeah, well we went there to mail stuff.
No.
No, the Vatican Post was took about took about a week, where the Italian Post took about 2 months. And so if you mailed something
Oh,
for
you were really mailing stuff there.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I thought that was a joke.
no, this was in the 90s, where there's no such thing as email or anything. You had to send, if you wanted, you had to either use a fax, or and that was expensive because international calling was ridiculously expensive, or you sent a mail letter with a stamp on it.
Oh.
Yeah. And so we mailed from the Vatican because Vatican City Post was way faster than Italian Post.
Yeah, and they're their own country inside that country, right?
Yes, technically,
How
yes.
wild is that?
Well, not.
You don't think so?
Well, no. The Vatican's been its own country for thousands of years. It used to be a whole lot bigger. Historically in Italy, there were the Papal States, which was a big part of Italy, and they just whittled it down to that little 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer area. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's important that they maintain their autonomy, I would assume, and as far as their role in their church, I suppose. But you don't go through any sort of "I'm in another country" when you go into the Vatican.
Yeah.
You just walk through the
So,
door.
you don't have to have like a passport to get from.
No,
That makes sense. I mean,
they're de facto Italian. Like, it all mixes together. Like when you get change, this was when they still had lira. When you get change in the Vatican, you'd get a 500 lira coin. It just had the Pope on it, instead of some other Italian guy.
But they recognized it.
But
the
yeah,
same.
you could just go spend it in Italy,
That's pretty
right
cool.
next door. They didn't care. Yeah.
One thing I would pay all the money to see is their library.
Oh, sure. That'd be pretty cool.
Could you imagine the documents and scripts that they have from history?
I'm sure, but I don't know that I would do very well with the medieval Latin that's all written in.
True. But what a shame to keep that from the public.
Yeah, well,
You know,
yeah, I don't know what they're keeping from us, but
I always dream.
Yeah.
This is just me being crazy again, but I always dream like the Library of Alexandria. Most of those documents are
that'd be cool.
That would be so cool.
That'd be cool. Well, the Vatican's got some pretty neat things, and I'm not a super religious guy, but if you can look at La Pietà and not be moved, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. And is that the crucifixion?
No, La Pietà is the pity, and I believe Michelangelo carved it, and it is a very large marble statue of Mary holding a recently removed from the cross and dead Jesus in her lap, and it because obviously with Christianity the focus is on all of those sorts of things, the resurrection and whatnot. But sometimes I think that the grief of a mother losing her son is sometimes not thought of so much. But that statue captures it beautifully.
That is, I've never even thought about that. Really, about what Mary went.
If you see that statue, it's very moving.
That is interesting.
La Pietà.
La Pietà. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at. Wow, that's something I've never thought about.
Yeah, it is. It is the. It captures it, the moment perhaps of any mother who, whose son had died in an execution, that she was given a moment with him before he was entombed. Very sad.
What do you think? Oh man, I just lost. Oh, have you seen the crucifixion art piece that they have where he's on the cross and it looks like hell is dragging him down? I don't know what it's called in there, but it's just like a bronze statue, has Jesus.
Is it in Italy?
Yeah, it's in the Vatican.
I'm sure I did. And golly, that was years ago though, man.
To me, anyway, what I was getting with it is, to me, it's so wild that they have an art piece in there that focuses so much on Jesus being dragged to hell.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I found that very interesting. Like that'd be something that they would want to put at the forefront.
There's a lot of things that are pretty cool in there, and old, and so
that's the cool part about it, is old.
Yeah, when I lived there, you kind of. I mean, American history is amazing. Mm-hmm. It's very important to learn about, but there were just layers on layers of it there. I mean, Renaissance and World War II, and we went to Anzio, and there's a huge Allied cemetery there because Anzio was kind of the Normandy of Italy. Mm-hmm. Just amazing. And then I went down to Pompeii, and there's just so much to
Oh,
see. So much to see.
now do they have anything like from Pompeii? Did they have like an excavation site museum where you can go see the stuff that they've taken from there?
Yeah, you can walk around in the middle of it. You can walk around all over the whole place.
Oh, can you
In
actually
Pompeii, yes. You walk
really?
up and down the streets. Yeah.
And you can kind of see like what was buried.
Well,
Uh,
they have a proper museum that they've
do
moved
they
things to, and then but you can also walk through the streets of Pompeii where they've removed the ash
really?
over. Yeah, they've been doing it since the 18th century.
Hmm.
It's been taking them a long time.
Is that a pretty eerie feeling?
I think it's pretty cool. One of the things about
The Holocaust in Germany, that's an eerie feeling.
I haven't ever been to Germany and seen that, but the 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 thing that gets me when I visit a historical site is if you see evidence that there really were people there. I just don't like the sterile history things that don't,
Whitewashed.
yeah, well, it's just there's no evidence that anybody ever even touched that thing.
Yeah.
And so in Pompeii is great because there's graffiti on the wall and there's handprints where people were painting stuff, and just that just moves me. Yeah. In Rome, um, there is in the Forum, where I don't know if you remember the movie Ben Hur, where you drove up on the chariot right before the emperor.
Yeah.
You can stand right there, and there are ruts in the road rocks where the wagons have worn ruts in the rocks.
Really?
So all those years that they drove wagons through there, that they were ruts in the rocks, and so that's the sort of thing that kind of gets me when I visit a historical site.
Well, that almost puts it into a different perspective. Whenever you can actually stand there and see, like you said, that a human was here.
Yeah.
You know, because we as humans we have a tendency to, like I was talking about, disassociate.
Yeah.
And that's like whatever I learned about the Holocaust in school. I guess I don't know. I just disassociated that humans died.
Yeah.
You can't fathom the amount of death.
It's hard to fathom that sort of thing when you're a kid too.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you become a dad and you become a husband and you think about, and then you think about how a group of good humans could fall into such a place where they did not stand up to that, or couldn't stand up to it, or whatever compelled them to stand by and let that happen. Those are the sort of things that scare me.
Silence
versus artificial intelligence, because that sort of thing has been happening since humans started living close to each other, and we have to work hard to make sure we don't ever fall into that again.
You know, like you were saying, how do people fall in line for that? Like, I think silence and just going along with the easy flow of the current is just as bad as,
you know, the reasons for that are complicated, and
they are.
And none of them, there's no excuses, obviously, but you know, Germany, those people were in a really bad way for a long time, and just kind of reaching out for anything that would make them feel like a people again, I guess. But they kind of drank Kool-Aid way too hard.
Well,
so
that's kind of brings full circle here to just today's society. Most people want to live their life as quietly as possible, as peacefully as possible, and if it doesn't affect them, their money, or their family at that time, then they don't pay much mind into it. And that's no fault on anyone, because you know, we're all babies that have grown up and are bumping our way through this life trying to figure it out the best we can.
Sure.
And I couldn't imagine being put in a place to where my country is doing that to people and not stand up.
Yeah. You know, but it's going to be different every time, because you kind of know what to look for with Nazis and that sort of thing. But people are scared, and people are worried that they're doing something wrong, and they're doing, and people are worried that people are very insecure, and that has dictated bad things in people forever. Now everybody is so intent on making sure that you are told that you're not right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make myself feel so much more right than you by telling you that you're using the wrong word for that thing, or so I'm going to bend the language daily just to keep you looking stupid so I can feel smart. And that gets pretty old.
And coming back, but you asked another reason why I started this podcast
Yeah.
is because I'd be talking to people, and it seemed like any discussion you got in, no one would discuss.
Yeah.
They would talk at you. They would shout their points of view.
Yeah.
And instead of understanding where you're coming from, they just want you to concede. And that's another reason why I started this, is to be able to have conversations with differing people and make us listen.
I've spent the last 3 years in the pandemic. I
Oh
know,
my gosh.
I know what being shouted at is all about.
I applaud you for that. I don't know.
And it's not bad people. It's scared people that
Anxiety.
are, well, yeah. So I've grasped onto this little group, and they all say that if I eat the wormer for my horse from the feed store, that it will keep me from dying of COVID. And golly, man, I can't break loose from that. And then in COVID, it got to these. My grandfather was in World War II, and he said that the Nazis or the Germans would not surrender en masse. They'd trickle in one at a time. And the COVID hysteria and the groups that would wall themselves off in these really terrible information zone groups, they were so chained to each other by social media and peer pressure that they couldn't break loose and say, that ivermectin stuff is garbage. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Because they would lose their group security because they were terrified of COVID.
Yeah.
As no matter what they said,
they were scared of it.
They were scared of dying of COVID. And so, but they had their little globule of security that they couldn't break out of. And it was just so sad to, and then, the people would, so we just did the best we could as a medical community to help people and to get people through it. But it was a real interesting challenge.
It was interesting to watch America unfold during it.
Yeah.
Just as on the civilian side of things, just watching how it progressed from, week after week, but year after year, really. Because, in these small towns we live in, people are very skeptical.
Yeah.
I don't know.
My wife and I wore a mask in the Dollar General at Alton.
Oh, I bet you got some dirty looks.
Yeah.
How dare you?
It was like we had Joe Biden tattooed on our forehead or something. It was pretty fun. It was like, but the sign on the door says you have to wear a mask. So we're like, okay, we're going to respect the store owner's wishes. And so, but it was, and so, and the other flip side of that is that the denying of it all became almost a religion. But on the other side of it, those people, the mask wearing became a religion for them. And there's people still won't let that church go. They're like, they're walking around in the park with their mask on still. You see them. So it's clinging to a security
and it happens
zone. On both sides of the deal. So
it almost seemed like one side was trying to be, hey, I'm this great person that's going to save everyone.
Yeah.
And these guys I'm a free person who doesn't have to listen to what you're wanting me to do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's somewhere in the middle. We have a
solutions is
we have a kind of a responsibility. There's no way around it. We have a responsibility when we have a
civilized society.
Well, an infectious disease. We have kind of a responsibility. You shouldn't go to work when you're sick, stuff like that. But it certainly is easy to take it too far, and people don't like to feel controlled, and it really got out of hand bad.
What?
Because the people that don't like to feel controlled, they walled off, and then there was no reaching them.
What really scared me, and this is just but how fast elected officials grabbed onto the power.
Yeah.
Because, just look at the Patriot Act from 2001, whenever 9/11 happened. That's some freedoms we will never get back, because that's when the NSA was formed and everything. And through history, you have always seen whatever is taken from you, they never give it back. And that was it was wild to watch it, like in California and New York with Governor Cuomo. But
he was in New York. Yeah.
He's in New York. Well, he was on air like, wear your mask, do this. And then 2 days later, someone was recording him in a building.
Sure.
And it's like, well, I don't have to, because you know what I mean?
Sure. Well, yeah.
And with elected officials, they're all just human.
Sure.
And humans are psychopaths.
Well, I don't know that I completely understand anyone who would want to be in that role.
Me neither.
And so I don't begin to understand. I would not have the ability to predict them. So I would tend towards a more libertarian approach on that sort of thing, because I know who I am, and I know I'm not going to do bad things. And so I've always been pretty bad about, in every facet of my life, terrible. And in hospitals, like I worked in a big hospital system for a long, long time. We have ridiculous rules. I've been terrible about rules that I don't think apply to me. It's like, that rule doesn't apply to me. I'm not doing that. And we can't do that with laws. But it's kind of scary all the time out there, because you have people that can arbitrarily enforce things anytime they want to. So,
and when we're talking about like politicians, just in general, just as an example, but let's take President of the United States. We will never get the best of our country to do that job. You know why? They're out there making money. They're running their businesses. They're being successful.
Yeah.
We usually get the narcissistic sociopaths.
Yeah.
That cling to power.
Yeah.
And that's on blue, red, green. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. Because if you look back, we're getting ready to start the election cycle. Is this the best we got?
Well, I don't know that the system is very good in that regard, because
we have to have better selections.
So you have, like, say for instance, I'm not going to name any names, but you have pretty good guy A, pretty good gal B, C, all these pretty good people, decent people, hardworking, ethical, have the country in mind, and they don't stand out necessarily in the primary process.
No.
And so they all drain each other. And then you get the one that really, really stands out and gets a little bit more traction than than the other five. And you're like, oh, well, how did that happen? Yeah. Exactly. And it happened, it's happened definitely in both parties in recent memory.
It became almost a Saturday Night Live skit. The last election.
So I don't know. I would think that the parties could do a little better job putting forth the best people, rather than I don't know that the primary system is the best way to pick the presidential candidate. I don't know. I don't know that it works very well.
That's like the presidential debates. You have 2 minutes to articulate a point on why you should be running arguably the most powerful country in the world.
When there's like 9 people on stage.
And so you only have time. All right, Mr. President, what do you think about this? You have 1 minute to get out these emotional charged talking points.
Yeah.
Throw it at your enemy or your opposition, and then they do the same back. And there's no substance that's ever talked about.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I'm doing this long format, is because nowadays with our attention spans as humans, it's TikTok 15 seconds, and then move on to the next thing. Here, I've got a loyal fan base already.
Oh, great.
And they watch it and they listen, and they like that it's long, thought out, thoughtful discussion.
We've been all over the map tonight.
We have. Yeah. I love it. But that's what normal humans do when they're talking.
Well, yeah, true.
You know, and that's what I'm trying to be. I'm not trying to be scripted or.
Well, I'm kind of being a narcissist here, because nobody ever wants to hear. Well, I mean, because all of that's I'm talking about the bees and all that stuff. That's kind of esoteric, and so some people are interested in it, but not. It's the fine details of things kind of make people want to glaze over sometimes. I don't want to get too pedantic about the things, but
get it.
I think there's some pretty neat stuff out there in the world that people people might like even better than chat bot BGPT or whatever. GPT? Yeah. I think there's pretty cool stuff out there. So, I on my Facebook page, you might have seen it says I'm kind of a wannabe polymath.
Yeah.
And I really do. That's who I want to be. I want to be Thomas Jefferson without the slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. no slaves. I
Yeah.
don't want slaves.
I'm not laughing. It was funny.
Yeah, no slaves.
No slaves.
That's right out. But
Bad, bad.
no. I mean, you go to Monticello and you're like, daggum, he was a cool guy,
Yeah.
except for the slaves. But
Except for-
yeah, but he's he invented.
But
He was cool. He wanted to grow new vegetables and he wanted to learn new things, and it just I've always wanted to be like that.
yeah.
And so I've got a lot of interests, and I'm happy
Yeah.
to have done all that. So,
And that's like me. I'm from a small town. I did not come from a well-off family.
mhm.
And I want to do this because if I touch one, okay, growing up, I was always told follow your dreams.
Mm.
Do what you want. And then as soon as graduation hit, it was, why aren't you having a job? Go
Yeah,
get your job, start working, start suffering. And I did, I graduated in 2012. So over 10 years, I've been in the workforce. I went to the military. I did that. I'm here now.
sure.
But it took me that long to decide to actually bet on myself to follow my dream, which is something like this.
Yeah,
Just having everyday normal discussions with people.
that's great.
But it's scary for a lot of people that like to follow your dreams. That takes courage.
Yeah.
You have to bet on yourself, and a lot of people.
You'll do well because I mean you have a gregarious hobby. My hobbies are all just me out there by myself. Because
But that's probably nice for you.
well, yeah, I don't know. I wish I were better at playing with others, but I've never been any good at it at all. I used to in college. I would go when they would go, we're gonna do a group thing. I was
Yeah.
and I would pick the hottest, dumbest girls in the class, and I would say, ladies, we're going to make an A on this, and you're not going to have to do anything.
I bet they loved being partnered with you.
Absolutely. It was a hit. And they were like, really? I was like, yeah, we're going to make an A. It's going to be a really good presentation, and your names are going to be on it, and it's going to be awesome, and you don't have to do anything. And so that was my strategy for group projects in college.
Don't you think it almost takes a person like that to do a job like you do?
Well, my job is I don't know if I'm the right guy for my job. I've kind of stuck my soul in the forge and hammered it to where it works pretty good, I think. And but for being a physician is kind of a weird deal because you have to take a whole bunch of hubris and mix it with a whole bunch of absolute fear and mix it together in just a certain way where the critical mass fires your go forth. Because if you are dominated by one side, hubris, then you hurt people because you don't worry about hurting them and you don't think about decisions well enough. But if you're terrified and that part wins all the time, then you can't move. So you can't do anything for someone. You're too afraid to do anything. You
almost have to have a sense of cautious confidence.
Yeah, it's a balance, but because, like I said, you have experience and knowledge and training and all of these things on your side.
And you go through a lot of training.
But on the other side of it, you also know exactly how bad it could turn out if you do it wrong. And so you have to work through that, and you have to put them together, and they have to make a little fire that makes you do your job right. So
I got a question for you, because I've been following the VA very carefully for quite a while now, and they are starting to do ibogaine treatments for PTSD and clinical depression and all these.
What kind of treatments?
Ibogaine. It's a hallucinogen.
Okay.
Psychedelic hallucinogen. Have you looked into any of that?
I'd have to look into that, but that's kind of like not 101 psychiatry for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's worthwhile to do anything we can to try and help those people, because they have a very different form of mental illness than most of us are used to dealing with. Because the origins of their issues are from something that I have no frame of reference whatsoever. I have no idea what they went through, and I have absolutely no idea what it did to their brain chemistry. They have significant organic brain damage from the things that they went through. And we have to do everything we can to figure out what we can do for that.
Yeah. When I first got out, I went to a VA to having problems or whatever. Well, they put me on the VA starter pack. That's what we call it, the VA starter pack. And basically, it's a list of 6 different mental health medications.
Okay.
And the VA starter pack. That's what they start you with.
Sure.
And man, I did it. I went in. I got on it, and I lost 8 months of my life.
Wow.
I was a zombie. I was sleepwalking at night. Do you know one night I grabbed a space heater, and plugged it in and set it on the bed, not knowing I did it.
Yeah. Well.
And then I started working out. I quit. Someone showed me a video of me sleepwalking one night. And I'm like, scared me.
Yeah.
So I know I shouldn't have. It was against orders, but I quit all the meds cold turkey, and I started working out.
Yeah.
I started working out. I started doing ice baths. I started dieting. I was up to like 220 at the time. I got down to 160. I'm at 180 right now. But once I started doing all that thing, the symptoms in my brain let up.
Well, everybody's journey through that's going to be different. And so to say that yours is in a good place or better place now is fantastic news. But I don't ever want to discount the help that medicine offers people. But it's extremely important that we customize everyone's therapy and monitor it closely. You wouldn't, if you were my patient, you wouldn't walk into walls like a zombie for 6 months. You just wouldn't do that.
Well, it's just
their resources, maybe not that they don't have the resources, but I know that
there's so many of us.
I know that the VA is doing a better job of farming out a lot of their things that they're under resourced for to civilian doctors. And I'm lucky enough to be one of those doctors that gets to do things for vets, not so much in mental health, but in other things. But if the resources are so low that they couldn't follow you every 6 months, then something's going to change. That's not enough.
Well, it was a very scary time. Sure. I had no idea I was like that. These meds had me.
That's amazing. Wow.
They had me convinced I was doing better until someone pulled me aside and said, "You're not you."
That's amazing.
And I 100% medicine is needed. That I'm not bashing medicine at all.
Sure. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that lifestyle changes, exercise, healthy living, all those things are all good for mental health. So there's no doubt about it. So
I think maybe people should not start with medicine all the time.
Sure. Well,
do you feel like we've gotten in a society where
I think it would? I mean, if we're still on mental health, then maybe not. But there are some things you just can't.
Absolutely.
You can't will away. That they're like hypothyroidism or type 1 diabetes or
that stuff, that
rheumatoid arthritis or something like that. There's things that we got to do stuff. And so I
agree.
But I think it's almost always going to end up being a combination of things. In the 80s when fluoxetine came out, it really was a wave of getting away from any kind of therapy beyond medicine, because fluoxetine was a miracle. It's Prozac.
Yeah.
It was a miracle drug. It was the first drug that really did a good job of helping people with that neurochemical problem. But it became, it's a combination of everything that helps a person get to the healthiest place they need to be.
Yeah, because especially like anxiety and stuff, it's almost like it's a survival instinct to have that.
Well, anxiety is not a disease.
No.
Anxiety is a normal reaction to a negative stimulus.
Exactly.
But when anxiety is not reasonable in the face of no negative stimulus, then that is crippling.
Like pass out in a Bass Pro.
Yep.
Just walking around.
When an anxiety attack defined is when the fight or flight nervous system fires without an appropriate stimulus. And the human is the only animal on the planet that can create their negative stimulus. But when you're sitting in the garage or the grocery store looking at a can of tomato soup, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're fixing to get eaten by a bear, that's even double hard, because it's terrifying because there's no bear. If there's a bear, it's reasonable, and those feelings are normal.
Yeah.
And you go, I get away from the bear, I feel like, oh my gosh, but you're like, what? I'm looking at a can of so people feel like they're going to die when they have panic attacks. And so, yeah,
I don't know. It's a crazy one though, because Yeah, I mean, there definitely, don't get me wrong. I think medicine's very important, and I'm an idiot. I have no training or education, but I'm just a stupid tire man. Uh,
Well, I'll end on this. When I was a young physician, I thought in training and young, I had this notion that my prescription pad was akin to like a wizard's bag of magic potions. And it was my job to figure out which magic potion the patient needed.
yeah,
And it just doesn't work that way. It's
yeah,
not like that. It's a whole lot more complicated than what magic potion they need.
absolutely. I
So,
mean,
yeah.
so many different people out there in the world.
Whew, you wore me out. I'm pooped.
Are you?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this.
I hope this was good. I don't
I
know.
loved it,
Oh, good.
and I guarantee you, everyone else is going to love it.
Oh, fantastic.
Before you leave, please tell everyone if you want them to follow you or find you, your business.
Sure. That's dumb. I should promote myself, shouldn't I? Right.
I got you, bro.
I practice internal medicine at Mammoth Spring, Arkansas, and I see adult patients for primary care, and I also see patients that have more complicated problems. I focus a lot on gastrointestinal issues, and so I do colonoscopies and EGDs, and I treat hepatitis C. There's not a lot of guys around that treat hepatitis C, and so screening colonoscopies and stomach troubles, I see a ton of that. My office is easy to get in and easy to get out. My staff's awesome, and we take good care of folks.
What city did you say you were in?
Mammoth Spring,
Mammoth
Arkansas.
Spring, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the phone number to your clinic?
870-907-7024 is my office number. I don't know, man. Maybe I must have had a long day. I couldn't remember my office number. It's a relatively new office number for me, so that's why it's a little tougher for me to remember. But
do you have any websites or social media?
Yeah. We have Cochran Internal Medicine and Endoscopies on Facebook.
Okay.
Yep. And follow us, like us, all that sort of stuff.
And follow him on Facebook, guys.
Yeah.
And get into him. He's a really good guy.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Man. Oy.